Good evening. Welcome to this Alpine Property live webinar series, Buying a Dream Home in France. My name's Jonathan Watson from Lumon. I'm your host this evening to discuss all things property France, namely the Alps. The Alps. I can just smell those pines, feel the cold, sharp air on my face. Can you? The Alps is truly one of the most beautiful places in the world. And tonight we're going to take you one step, or maybe a few steps closer to actually living that dream. Thank you, audience, for attending and joining us. We promise an exciting evening with information from experts who live and breathe the mountain life and also specialists in their respective fields. I'll shortly hand over to them for their intros, but before then, just some information for you, the audience. We want this webinar to be really interactive, and we have taken lots of questions from you already. We'll try and get through as many as possible, but you should see a question box where you can actually submit some live questions yourself, which I can ask the panel. So do feel free to do that. Usually we struggle to get through all of the questions. It's of course very difficult to fit into 1 hour all the ins and outs of buying property overseas, but do put those questions in. You will get a copy of the recording at the end, and we will try and answer those questions more directly. You will be able to speak to all the panelists more directly after. So without further ado, let me hand over to our panelists for their introductions. Gareth Jeffries, partner at Alpine Property, our resident property expert. Over to you, please.
Hi there, good evening. Yes, I've been at Alpine Property now since its inception, almost 25 years ago. I came out to the Alps for the mountains because I love doing activities and living out in the mountains. I used to live in a city. I spent all my holidays traveling to go to the mountains, and I thought, I'm just going to go and live there. And I fell into this job, marketing, but have found myself running the business with a team. We're now 20 people. We started at, I was the third person, and it's kept me going and is now keeping 20 other people going out in the Alps.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gareth. And Natalie, our resident mortgage advisor from IPF, over to you, please.
Forgot to unmute myself. Very clever. Hi, my name's Natalie. I work for International Private Finance. We are a team of 6 women who specialise in securing French mortgages for non-residents. It was founded by Fiona Watts 16 years ago, so we've been up and running a considerable amount of time. From my point of view, I've been with the company 2.5 years. I absolutely loved France. I love France. I lived in Nice for 13 years prior to moving back to the UK with my family, and absolutely love what I do. I love helping people like yourselves who are watching today secure their dream of living, maybe permanently, maybe just having a holiday home in France, and providing the best possible service we can, along with securing the best possible option for you if you're looking for finance in France.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Natalie. And Alan Watson, partner at Spectrum IFA, our resident wealth manager. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar tonight. Alan Watson, partner in Spectrum. We are one of the largest private financial advisors in Europe. We are obviously very active in France, the reason for tonight, but we're also in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Switzerland, and the Benelux countries. We are all very, very long-termers in the business because it's a very complicated business. And over the last few years, it's become even more complicated with the regulation, the compliance issues, knowing your client, giving the best advice to your client. So the long-term experience does help a great deal. Personally, I started off in Stuttgart in 1987. Remember, that was the time before we had internet or mobile phones. And in 87, there was quite a big stock market crash. And would you believe the person who told me about that crash was my mother when I got back to the hotel that night. So we've changed a lot since then. We've got some great tech behind us, and that helps a great deal. So personally, went from Germany to Holland. I was in Holland for 14 years, running my own business there, IFA business. I've arrived in France with my family since 2000. I've always went to school here, so we've been very, very immersed in the French life, the French way of living, the language, the legal issues, the social issues, you name it. We've had to live the whole life here, and it's been a wonderful learning curve because our boys have been to school. They're actually men now, they're grown up. And yeah, we love the life. We often say that we see tourists coming here from Holland, from Belgium, from England, and it's a pity because they have to go back, and we actually live here. So it's a great place. There are many, many positives, socially, you name it. And even, I'll just finish on my quick note now, I've been here so long, apart from knowing a lot of lawyers, accountants, and must I say sensible charging people, which is quite important for people arriving here. You need to get the best deal quickly. We also can help people. I get questions from clients, where can I insure my car? Where's the best place? The best bank to set up an account because I need to do this, this, this. We can help on all those sorts of things because of the experience in long term here. So love to help anyone in all sorts of ways. And obviously my speciality is investments, tax efficiency in France. Have a good evening.
Fantastic, Alan. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think you've made a really good point there. You know, yes, whilst we're all sort of experts in our respective fields, there's lots of sort of other connections we have to the whole lifestyle. And it's not just buying a property. There's obviously so many other considerations that people will have, healthcare, visa, you know, other questions. And certainly the panel, I'm not in France, I'm in London, but certainly the panel that are there in France will have those connections and we can introduce you to people as well. So yeah, do feel free to ask those questions of us. So myself, Jonathan, I mean, I was 5 years old in 1987. When I started doing this job 15 years ago, we were still using fax quite a lot. So I've certainly clocked up a few years as a currency specialist at Lumon, helping people transfer money internationally. I'm a keen skier. I've only ever been out there for 1 week, so I hope to knock on Gareth's door one day, looking to buy a property out there and spend some real time there like you, audience, may be doing one day. But I'm very interested in the FX markets and currency. I was once on BBC News talking about the referendum with Clive Myrie. Ever since that interview, his career's really taken off. So I'm glad it worked for one of us. What we like to do with these webinars at this time is actually find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So I've just launched a poll, should be on your screen, about when you might be starting to look at property over in France. As I'm sure, audience, you're aware, these things don't happen overnight. It can be quite a long-term plan. So it's just helpful for us to understand where in that buying process or searching process you could be, just to try and help us give some really relevant information on that process. You might be just looking online, you might be looking to put in offers. Yeah, it's just helpful for us to understand that so we can try and give some really relevant information. So thank you very much, everyone who's answered that poll. Going to launch one more relating to the financial aspects in terms of when you'd be in a position to put forward an offer. Certainly very important from the currency side of things. As we've just mentioned, buying the property doesn't happen overnight. You're talking anywhere from sort of 2 to 3 months from the initial compromis de vente stage, agreeing the purchase and having your offer accepted, to the acte de vente. And in that time, certainly from a currency perspective, the markets can be moving quite a bit. So again, understanding where you are in that process is quite helpful for us. Lumon offer a number of contract options to allow you to fix exchange rates at different times to help you understand those costs. So thank you everyone who's done that poll. I'm going to launch our last and final poll, audience, just finding out a little bit more about you. Where are you from? Where are you joining us from today? Of course, the buying process in France is exactly the same wherever you're from in the world, but there can be little nuances relating to banking and other factors that can be quite helpful for us to share in these webinars, just to try and help the whole process go through smoothly. So yes, a lot of you in the UK, as expected, but also France, parts of Europe, and some Americans joining us this evening, which is great. So we'll make sure we're covering everyone there. Right, enough from me. Let's dive into some of these questions. Of course, we want to find out a bit more about the buying process. It's about buying property in the Alps. Gareth, let's start with you. Just a very simple question. How do I start? You know, I've got the idea in my head. I want to start looking at buying a property over in France. What are the first steps?
Don't rush it. Don't rush the process. Make it fun. come out on holiday in, I would say more than, if you've got a favorite place, then concentrate on that, obviously. But if you've visited a few places, come out on holiday in the winter, in the summer, but also in the seasons in between, in the interseason, in the spring or the autumn. In conjunction with that, you also have to get your head around how much money you can spend. So I would say pretty early on, if you're going to need a loan, speak to a mortgage provider like Natalie at IPF to get your head around how much you can afford. That is an important early thing to do. And then make a few visits, get your head around the market to find out what you can afford, so you can recognize when something comes online, you can recognize that's a good deal, I need to go and see that, and then be prepared. Nowadays we've got virtual tours, we've got YouTube's videos of properties, so we can get a pretty good idea of what you're looking at. But jump on a plane generally, I'm afraid, and come out and have a look, and then you'll have the knowledge to know if what you're looking at is what you want, is in the right place, and is at the right price.
Okay, good stuff. And while we're on that, Gareth, do you mind just running through in a nutshell the sort of buying process for anyone? So you found a lovely property, you've had a chat with Natalie about, you know, the finance, and you're comfortable with sort of putting that offer in. What happens next? What does that look like, please?
So nowadays, most agents will ask for a signed written offer. It's called the offre d'achat, the offer to buy, and we'll get that signed by you and by the seller as well, just to show that everybody is on the same hymn sheet. And then we'll arrange a compromis de vente with a notaire. Generally, it's the same notaire for the buyer and the seller here. That's different from the UK. And we'll get the compromis de vente signed, and then generally minimum 3 months until everything is sorted out before we can sign the acte de vente, which is the act of sale. And one thing not to forget, at that compromis stage, you're going to have to put down a deposit, which helps bind you and bind the seller to the deal. So you are bound into the deal early on. But for instance, if you needed a mortgage, you would put a clause in the compromis de vente to say if you can't obtain the mortgage, then you can get out of the sale and take your deposit with you. But if you just change your mind, you have to think you may be leaving 5 to 10% for the sellers to keep. So yeah, it focuses the mind, that 5 to 10%.
It's very buyer friendly, I find, the French system. You know, I've helped tens of thousands of people buying property in France over the years, and as you say, that compromis de vente, it's a bit like the exchange in the UK, isn't it? And that happens very early in the process, so there's none of this problem, you know, the gazumping or deals falling out of bed in the UK, where you spend 3 or 4 months, you know, getting all the paperwork together, and then all of a sudden you lose the property. You know, you deal with that legal aspect really early on in the process, and that does make it much stronger a purchase. And as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, with that compromis de vente, you get that 10-day cooling off period, and it's only the buyer who can then pull out. Is that right? The vendor can't sort of go
Yes.
back on their word.
It's it's you have 10 days. That's a standard thing that you can pull out during that period. Not many people do, and once we've signed that compromis de vente, then I don't know what the percentage is, but in general, we get it through to the end. We get it through to the sale.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. And of course, audience, you can reach out to Gareth to discuss that buying process in more detail as you need to. Well, look, Natalie, we touched there a little bit on getting your mortgage sorted. In terms of that process, so how long does it take to get the mortgage arranged, and what sort of paperwork would people need to set that up, please?
Yeah, so rule of thumb, we typically say if you don't have a mortgage in place or you haven't started the process prior to making an offer on a property, if you have the suspensive clause that Gareth has just mentioned, which means that your deposit is protected, the general rule of thumb is that you have 1 month by which to make your application, 2 months to get your mortgage offer issued, and 3 months until completion. That's a very, assuming everybody's working on full cylinders throughout the whole process. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer to completion if various things need to be put into place, such as life insurance, opening bank accounts and things like that. But you're looking at 3 to 4 months. And we do say that the earlier you approach somebody like ourselves in the process, the better it is, because we can get your ducks in a row, we can get you ahead of the game, and it just means that everybody gets to where they want to be as soon as possible.
Very good. Yes, that's certainly something I've had experience of. It's all well and good looking at these beautiful properties, but if you can't afford them, it's a waste of your time, really, isn't it? So yeah, very important to check the financing and try and get things sorted earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we do say to people, please do get in touch with us if you are thinking of it. Have that exploratory telephone conversation with us. We'll go through in fine detail your personal situation, and we can then guide you so that when you go and talk to the likes of Gareth, you can say, okay, I know what I can afford. I've spoken to somebody, they understand my situation. This is my budget. There's nothing worse than looking at properties, thinking I've fallen in love with something, and then coming back, doing the finances and going, well, I'm so far off. Affordability is so different in France compared to the UK that, it's good to know what your baseline is and where you're starting from before you waste your own time, as well as ultimately Gareth's. It's good to have an idea from the offset.
I'll just butt in. We'll ask if you've sorted out a mortgage, if you have a mortgage in principle, who you're speaking to, what stage of the process you're at, because if you try and make an offer and you haven't started that process, I'm not saying your offer's worthless, but it's worth a lot less than someone else making an offer with all that sorted.
Very good. And I guess that can almost help with your negotiations in some respects. If you are sort of going into these things blind as a buyer versus someone who's done their research, got everything together. And certainly from the currency point of view, clients who've got that financing a bit more nailed on, go over and look at property, has a currency broker running in the background for them, they are in some respects viewed more strongly than someone who doesn't have those types of arrangements. So yeah, good advice there. Okay, Alan, let's turn over to you and finance. So obviously if people are moving to France, clearly that's a different sort of jurisdiction. Perhaps people have already got arrangements in the UK. How does that work? Can people stay with a UK advisor, or with their UK investments? How does that all work in practice?
A big question, Jonathan, and there is a lot of confusing information on the internet about this sort of subject, and unfortunately there are also a lot of advisors who don't really know the baseline of the situation, and they advise wrongly. I'm constantly having conversations with clients who are not really aware of what they should do, what they cannot do. Basically, the way the rules work is, in France we have a tax year starting 1st of January, ending on the 31st of December. If you come during that year, even if it's only 2 or 3 months now, it's always best to file a tax return for that year for being in France. When you file that tax return, you need to declare everything, bank accounts, investments, anything at all, pensions, the whole lot. Don't eliminate anything, because it's better to start with a clean sheet and make sure that everything's declared from day one. Then you'll have no problems in France. You will sail along, everything will be very easy. Some people decide not to do that. They tend to think they can still hide things. It's not possible these days. So if you start with everything clean and correct, you must realize that in the UK, the ISA is a very, very tax efficient vehicle. It's almost crazy not to have one in the UK. Once you move to France, it loses the tax efficiency completely. So it's best to maybe move to an equivalent sort of product in France, that we have things called the assurance vie. Please don't worry about the title. It is not buying life assurance. It's just the rough sort of translation from English to French. But it's the most tax efficient vehicle any newcomers can put their money to in France. It's extremely good for inheritance planning as well. And it's an incredibly flexible vehicle. Well, for example, we have clients who say, certainly your subject, Jonathan, I have sterling. I love sterling. I don't want to change my sterling to euros. The French banks tell me I've got to. You actually do not have to. You can keep your sterling as sterling for as long as you want. You can put it into something like an assurance vie, get all the benefits you want from it. And then if after a few years you say, well, France is going to be home, the kids are happy, we don't want to go back, we don't want to go anywhere else, you can convert it into euros. So then you would be, of course, far more tax efficient than leaving an ISA in the UK. I won't get into the boring rules, taxes, and bits and pieces here, but basically it would be charging you money on the growth every year, around 30%. And that's a great waste of money. That's eliminating your growth, and that's really wasted money when you can be in a better place. Pensions are generally more favored in France because the French are still somewhat socialist. So they believe everyone should have a pension. Everyone should have the right to retire, as you probably know in France, sometimes very, very early, but they do respect pensions. So if you have UK pensions, you can keep them in place. You can transfer them to things like QROPs, qualifying recognized offshore pension schemes, SIPs, self-invested pension schemes. You can do all these things again, play with the currencies as I just mentioned, but you're not locked into, I must transfer it because I'm a French resident. All sorts of possibilities, we can help on this. The only other quick thing I would say, and some people surprisingly do not come prepared to this, set up a bank account as quickly as you can in France. It's very important for paying the bills, the electricity, all the bits and pieces like that. Some people arrive, and I've had clients from America quite recently who were going around in Lyon. They don't speak a word of French, and they could not communicate with the bankers there. So in the end, we managed to help them and set up a bank account, a very good international bank account in France. But it's one of those important steps to think of from the beginning. The investment side, that can flow. You don't have to panic about it, but it's best if you do come in a tax year and you're filing a tax return the year after, then I would suggest put all those things in place and have a clean sheet to begin with.
Thank you very much, Alan. That's brilliant. And you've mentioned a point there about French bank account, which is a question I'd seen come in before this that I will certainly take on, and you can certainly add to that. It is very important. So one of the key thoughts, isn't it? I'm moving to a country, or I'm paying money into this country, surely I need a bank account. I will come on to that one, but I've just had a live one come in from Mark. Thank you, Mark. A live question here. Gareth, I think we can turn this one over to you. I see some listings include VAT and some don't. Is VAT required on all purchases?
Yes, all except, so basically all. But if you're buying a leaseback, that will be shown without VAT. Now, leasebacks have been around a long time. It's a system that the French government have promoted to encourage building, specifically in ski areas. But buying a leaseback comes with some quite onerous stipulations. Basically, you're going to need to keep hold of that property for at least 11 years, if not 20. And if you sell it in that time, you're going to have to, within that 20 years, you're going to have to pay back a proportion of the VAT. We're not selling any leasebacks at the moment. We have done, but we don't sell very many because to sell them, you tend to have to do a hard sell. You have to have a very salesy approach, and it's sold as quite often as an investment vehicle, which is not something we do. We really like to sell apartments, chalets, which things you can rent, you can stay in, you can sell, whereas a leaseback, it's rented most of the time through the leaseback company, and you get to stay in it for a few weeks of the year. So basically, you pay the VAT unless you're buying a lease back, and they're pretty rare.
Okay, that's brilliant. I hope that's cleared that up for you, Mark. So, French banking, as I say, it's a question I get asked quite regularly, obviously dealing with the finance side of things, the currency payments. So just say Lumen can introduce you to a French company that you can help open a bank account with. Normally the earliest that you can open a French bank account is when the compromis de vente is signed. There are some exceptions, but you normally need to have an actual address in France to open a French bank account, and this company will take the signing of the compromis de vente as that first step. So I'm sure the other panelists will have contacts as well, but yes, we can certainly help anyone there looking to open a French bank. In any event, with Lumon, you don't actually need a French bank account for the purchase in France, because you get what we call a wallet with your registration. So the very first step is to register with us to open an account. It's totally free of charge. And then you actually, as I say, you have access to, we call it a Euro wallet. It's a Euro client account that you can use to make payments for your purchase. So let's just say I had an offer accepted today with Gareth, let's just say 100,000 euros, and you thought the rates were good. At that time, you can actually purchase 100,000 euros. By the way, the rates are quite good at the moment. We hit 120 today. If I had a little siren, I'd make some whirly noises or something, because it's actually near the highest points in 2.5 years buying euros. So really good news, and we've had lots of buyers very excited by the fact the rates have gone up. So yes, you could use this wallet to then purchase 100,000 euros, even though you're not actually making any payments just yet. And then in 2-3 weeks time, or however long it takes, when that 10% deposit is due, you can use this account, so we call it a wallet, to then pay out directly to the notaire. So it's going to be 10%, 10,000 euros. We will pay that directly to the notaire on your behalf. There's no transfer fees or costs. Obviously 100,000 minus 10, that's going to leave you with 90,000 euros in the wallet. And then once you get to the actual completion date, Gareth sends you an email. I'll write it, say 89,000 for completion. So you've got 90 in the wallet. We'll send 89 to the notaire. That's going to leave 1,000 euros left, and that can just go to your French bank account. So this is one of the advantages of us. It's not just we can demonstrate savings on exchange rates versus the banks and some other options out there. It's that we can actually help with the planning and the timing of when you actually buy the currency. So as I say, the rate's quite good at the moment. We've actually had a lot of clients recently purchasing euros using the wallet, holding their euros here, even though they may not be completing for a few months. Now, some wily-eyed of you out there might say, well, hold on, what happens if the rate goes up? And that may well happen, and we can't control that. And we're not saying that now is the best time to buy ever. No one on this planet knows exactly where rates are going to go. Unfortunately, when you come to make these decisions, you've really just got to do what suits you. And certainly for these clients, they felt the rate was good, so they decided to lock in. Yes, the levels could go up, they absolutely could, but also they could go down. We've got the budget coming up in the UK in the next few weeks. There's the American election, again in just a few weeks at the beginning of November. So these are quite important events for the market and could change the rates. So for these clients who've purchased, they're basically taking the risk out, and they're not going to have an embarrassing phone call to Gareth if Rachel Reeves does something major with the budget and the pound goes down. So do you need a bank account? Yes, ultimately you will, to set up your bills and things once you've purchased the property. But in the very early stages, you can utilize this wallet that Lumen offer to actually make payments to the notaire. If you're buying a car, you could use this wallet to pay the car company. If you're buying furniture, building, doing renovations, any payments you need to make, you can actually do that from the wallet. So that can be quite handy. And we can introduce you to some French banking contacts as well. So you do need a French bank account, but there are some other options in the early stages to make sure it goes through smoothly. So I hope that answers the question. Gareth, let's come back to you. We've got some questions about what areas you're covering. Are there any particular sort of popular popular places, or you know, particularly hot areas? Obviously, ski areas. You know, where's doing well at the moment? Where do you cover?
Well, we cover the Haute-Savoie, which is a department. It's a little bit like a county in the UK, and the Haute-Savoie, the top of it hits Geneva. So all our areas are accessible from Geneva Airport in within an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. So we cover places like Chamonix, the most well known, followed probably by Morzine, Leger, Châtel, Samois, La Clusaz, Les Carreaux, Saint-Gervais, Les Contamines. So some of those you'll have heard of, some of those maybe less so, but they're all, you can drive between them all within an hour or so. There's the Southern Alps as well, places like Val d'Isère, Méribel, Courchevel, and then even further south, but we don't cover those areas. Our area is really nice because of its proximity to Geneva Airport, and the number of flights that come in and out of there daily has really boosted our area over the last 25 years.
What I really like about Chamonix is you've got sort of, you're in the middle, aren't you? And you've got sort of 3 different ski areas. I'm going to forget all of the names, I'm afraid, but because you're sort of in the valley there, you're sort of surrounded by the mountains, aren't you? And you've got really different types of skiing. You know, you can go up towards the glacier, then you've got some of the lower lying places with the tree line. It's very varied, isn't it?
So Chamonix is a disparate set of areas that aren't really connected. So you've got Brévent, Flégère, La Tour, Les Houches as well, and your pass also covers you over in Saint-Gervais-les-Contamines, depending on the pass you get. Oh, and you can go through the tunnel through to Les Contamines. And each one of those areas works for different people. So that's the brilliant thing about Chamonix. Whereas if you go to what's pictured behind me, where I live, that's the Porte du Soleil. All the areas, or almost all the areas in the Porte du Soleil, are connected together. So you can start skiing in Leger and then ski to Morzine and then Avoria and then Châtel and then over to Switzerland. We don't have the hard mountaineering and the hard off-piste like they do in Chamonix, but we've got a totally different setup, which works for a different set of people. And so that's why at the beginning I was saying you need to get your head around what you're after from your second home or the place you want to buy, because these areas are all very different.
Very good. Okay. Anything to add there, Alan, in terms of some of the you know, interesting areas and any particular favourites you've got? I'm really whetting my appetite. I think I'll have to book a holiday after this.
You better. It's getting close, and the snow. It's a little bit warm today, but the snow is starting to fall. We've seen the white sort of mountain peaks. No, I don't want to go against Gareth, because obviously I'm living in the Savoie, another county. Gareth is in the Haute-Savoie. And yeah, there's a lot of competition locally, I think, because both areas have fantastic mountains. Because we've been here so long, like Gareth, you've seen an explosion of commerce in places like Chamonix, especially Morzine. I know the Morzine area very well. And so there used to be places that closed at certain times of the year, and it was just pretty dead. Now they're open, they're vibrant, there are things happening. It's really a lot of life in all these places. So the same goes to where I am. Here you can go to places like Courchevel, you can go to Tignes, you can go to Les Deux Alpes, all these various places which are high resorts. They generally have a pretty good snow record. Val Thorens, places like that, very, very high. They are, I wouldn't say everywhere is guaranteed these days, but it's probably that you're going to have snow for Christmas. You're probably going to have snow until April. So it's a pretty decent ski season. As you touched on earlier, I think before we went live, Jonathan, Chamonix Airport does offer an excellent service through the winter. It's quite a big airport for a small sort of town here. It can cope with pretty large jets coming in and out. So if people want to ski the weekends and even have the facility of owning a property here, but going back on a regular basis, they can use Chamonix Airport. It's a very good functioning airport. They can handle the snow, they can handle the ice, they don't have problems in those sort of wintry conditions. So on top of that, yeah, the Haute-Savoie, you have the Lake of Geneva. Here we can be very bragging actually and say we've got the biggest lake in France, the Lake of Aix-les-Bains, the Lac de Bourget, which is a truly beautiful lake. We were there a couple of days ago having a Sunday lunch with the family, a restaurant right on the lake. So you can sit there, look at the mountains in one direction, look at the lake in the other. Very dreamy, and the food's pretty good as well. So yes, a lot of pluses about both areas. And Gareth, like you said, their area has connections to Geneva, a little bit closer. We also have the other airports here. So I think both are as good as possible for all the sort of clients that we're talking to.
Fantastic. Well, I'm in central London, so yeah, hoping it's not about to snow. Natalie, I think you said you're in Hampshire. I'm assuming not much skiing there at the moment.
No, and I'm thinking I should maybe ask myself about a French mortgage.
Well, let's get. I was going to say we've gone off piste. We haven't really, because it's all about skiing and the territory. But let's get back on track with the buying of property there. Natalie, just staying with you then. What sort of deposits are typically needed or on offer with these mortgages? You know, what sort of finance would people need to be considering?
But it depends on everybody's situation and wants, you know, what their cash position is. But typically, I'd say sort of as a rule of thumb, most French lenders will go up to 80%. Some will only do 70% loan to value. So you're looking at minimum sort of deposit of 15% to put down, up to, depending on the area, depending on the property, on your desires and your capacity, you know, as low or as high as you want. It really depends to you. I think something important to know from the offset when you're looking for French finance is that the deposit is just part of it. That's just what you need. That's, you know, the cash that you're going to put in. But things like the notaire fees, which are the legal fees, the stamp duty, etc., that you pay in the UK, and any agents fees, etc., are a cash cost. They can't be included in the mortgage. So that's why it's really key to have a discussion, as I say, early on, to work out, okay, here's my pot of cash, you know, that's what I've got, how much of it is going to have to be a cash cost to those fees, and then what does that mean in term from a mortgage perspective. So, you know, I'd say get in touch with us as soon as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. Try and find out. It's obviously dependent on everyone's sort of individual situation, really, isn't it? And what's going to be available. Okay, thank you, Natalie. Well, Alan, let's come back to you on a bit of wealth management. I mean, just in terms of sort of taxes, social charges, you know, France, you've got a good sort of standard of living generally. How do people sort of protect their wealth? You know, you're coming over to France, you've perhaps got some investments, you want to make sure you're getting the most for your money. What's, you know, how does that sort of work in practice?
Fairly straightforward, really, Jonathan. Like I said earlier, pensions are quite respected and protected. The French don't expect you to transfer your pension, to do anything urgently with it. Like I said, you can keep it in the UK in sterling. Maybe you're 20 years off retirement. It's a bit of a gamble, as you all know, currency-wise, legislation-wise, what's going to happen with the budget? Will the Labour government take money from pensions? A lot of maybes out there, but you can keep a pension in place. The advice we generally give to clients who have ISAs and generally portfolios, they fall under the same sort of remit. They're not quite as tax efficient as ISAs, but once you move to France, those portfolios will be chargeable. The French look upon those as non-qualifying investments. Brexit, of course, does not help this. So they will expect you to declare these on your tax form and pay around 30% every year on the growth of that investment. This is partly social charges and partly a growth tax. Social charges 17.2%, growth tax 12.8%. It's something I would always advise clients, you know, there is no point in really keeping, if you're going to stay in France, there is no point in keeping your UK investments. Transfer them to the far better qualifying, advantageous investments that you have here. And like I said, it's a complicated subject, so love to advise clients in a more sort of, you know, elongated way. But quite simply, if you put your money into an assurance V, you transfer your ISA, your portfolio, to an assurance V, you can enjoy all the same investments. You're not restricted. You don't have to think it's got to be a French portfolio. It doesn't have to be a Euro portfolio. It can be 100% sterling, 100% UK stock market, if you like, the FTSE. It can be 100% the NASDAQ. It can be anywhere you like within an assurance V, so a very qualifying investment. And once the money goes in there, if you don't take any money out, you do not pay any taxes, any social charges on the growth of that investment. It can be there for 3 years, 5 years. Like I said, there are various times that kick in. After 8 years, it's a very efficient vehicle. I'd like to go into that in more depth with clients when they have specific needs. But just generally, if you put the money in on day one, leave it there because it's growing for your retirement, or it's growing to pay the children's education, pay off the mortgage one day. It can be used for any sort of possibility down the road. You will not pay anything in France. So an extremely efficient vehicle. You have full access to it if you need it. You can keep an eye on the progress. I can help. It's just a very, very good, clean, easy vehicle. And I guess the great barometer is that the French love this vehicle. The French are very cautious with their money. You cannot say that France is Monaco. It's not a tax paradise. So you have to make the right moves. You have to make the clever moves. And the French love the Assurance V. They sometimes have 4, 5, 6 of them because one is destined to pay for the children going through their further education. One is destined to pay off the mortgage. One is destined to top up the pension pot. So you can set them up for all these different reasons. So in general, I would say once you make the decision you're going to stay here, think about fairly rapidly in that tax year that you're here, converting these investments into far more sensible and far more protective investments in France, and enjoy a lot more growth.
Fantastic. Okay, very good. And yes, I guess like some of the other factors here, including currency, it does come down to your individual situation, what's going to work necessarily, what might be the right approach for one individual may not be the right for someone else. So it's really important to have those deep and meaningful conversations with the panelists just to understand your options. Gareth, let's come back over to you. Certainly I've experienced this. The question's asking, it was Louise is asking about the minimum deposit for a chalet, and then there's another question about building and renovations I'll come on to, but minimum deposit, I mean, sometimes I know it's a 10% deposit for some properties, sometimes it's 5. Is that down to the buyer? Is it a negotiation? Is there any particular rules there?
There's no rules, and it is a negotiation, but it's generally 10%. So the seller will expect a 10% deposit, and if you suggest a 5, you might have your reasons, and they might be willing to negotiate. In theory, you could say, I don't want to put a deposit down, and it's up to the seller. Do they want to agree with that? They would find that weird. But this isn't covered by legislation. It's not it's just what happens. It's I'm putting this amount down to show my willingness to do this deal. So 10% can be negotiated, could be 5%, but it's not set in stone.
Okay, very good. And then Louise went on to ask about, she said, can you still buy old properties in Châtel at a good price? Are building and renovation costs high? So maybe we could just do a wider question on that. You know, if you want to tackle that one, Gareth.
There are still old properties to be found in almost all of our areas, or smaller properties on nice plots that could be renovated, could be expanded, and could be worth a lot more when you're finished. Things have moved on a lot in the last 25 years in places like Châtel and Morzine and Leger, and sometimes we have properties that are valued for the land value now. Renovation costs are high. I imagine they're high in the UK as well. The materials costs have gone through the roof since COVID, and if you're using local tradesmen, these are people that have to live in these these expensive areas. They're pricey places to live, and so they do charge quite a lot. You could try bringing in outside workers from Eastern Europe. That's a possibility, but you're taking a big risk if you don't know them, and also you might not be highly respected by doing that. I've been through various circles here, but I would say, use these local well-known tradesmen. So if something happens in the future that needs work, you know where to go. So there you go. There are properties
You may
available.
not be too popular in the boulangerie if you're, you've brought in some outsiders to help redecorate your house. Word might get round in the town.
Yeah, and quite often you'll have issues further on down the line, issues with your electrics, with your roof, and that can happen with anybody. But you'll have absolutely no sympathy if you start looking for a local tradesman to solve a problem that was put in by an Eastern European tradesman. So I would suggest work locally. Everyone will appreciate it.
Sure, and of course people could speak to you, and not just the panelists, but other people in the process, who may have those local connections to help. So that's brilliant. We've had.
I will
please.
just say on that, local tradesmen who are well respected, they're not going to be able to drop everything and come and do your job within the next 6 months. Quite often, you're going to be thinking about a year ahead, and that's how it goes.
Okay.
Can I just say from experience, I would suggest anyone moving into a mountain village or the local area, go to the mairie, go to the local town hall, ask them. They will love that. They will love the fact that you as a foreigner have moved in and you are immediately seeking their help. Okay, you may end up with the mayor's brother, who's a carpenter or an electrician or something like that. Not a bad thing, because you're in the circuit then. You're working with the local people. It's a very good thing. We've done it. We've been through that. And when we lived close to Morzine, we ended up with the best electrician, the best plumber that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, these guys were incredible. We had a breakdown of electricity on, I think it was something like Christmas Eve. We called the guy. He was in Saint-Jean, where Gareth lives, and we were in a place called Saint-Trou, which is about 10 minutes away. The guy was with us in 20 minutes. I mean, I've never heard of service like that before. He knew what he was doing. We saw him clicking a box down by the sort of entry to our drive. We had a wonderful Christmas. The only other thing I would just add, I'm not trying to pour cold water on what you said, Gareth, but I know from a point of view of the tax office, they are aware of the Eastern Bloc workers coming in. They are aware of how they work. They're aware that they try to work black. You don't get paid by a proper invoice, etc. So the guarantees are not there. So I know they're aware of them and they're trying to crack down on them. So again, go to the local people, the local contacts. There's always someone who's been in your village, probably a British family. They've been there many years. They will say, yeah, this is a good guy. This is a great guy. This one will come quickly. I know this one because the kids are at the same school. It works wonderfully, and that community spirit works superbly here. So I would suggest go that route.
Fantastic. Okay, really helpful. Good on the ground knowledge, which is exactly what these webinars are all about, demonstrating the knowledge and just what to do in some of these situations. Some of the live questions we'd had, Matthias Hoserson, we were talking about VAT earlier, maybe getting a bit technical here, perhaps Gareth and Alan, you can help, but he's asking, is VAT deductible if I buy the property through my company? Does the origin of the company make a difference whether they deduct VAT or not? Anyone want to tackle that one, please?
I'll briefly say, if you have a French company and your French company is running a business and you are buying that property for that business, then yes, you'll be able to reclaim VAT. But if he's talking about like a UK company trying to buy a French property and deducting VAT there, I don't know. More than likely not. Have you got anything to say on that, Alan?
Yeah, and that's something you have to be very careful with, because of course people have tried to buy property through UK companies and Dutch companies, etc. And there are big differences because, for example, in the UK, a trust is acceptable. It's something we grew up with, and the Anglo-Saxon trust works well. In France, they look straight through it and they say you're probably the owner of the trust, so we will tax you accordingly. So you have to be very careful with that sort of potential setup. And the other thing is to realize that since I came here, the tax offices were very, very straightforward, easy places with basically a lot of old ladies working in there because it was quite cold to work outside. So they worked with files. They were not very happy with tech. The transition to today is dramatic. The tax office speaks English. They have very, very impressive computer power. And there has been a complete change around from the old days of the offshore centers, the Isle of Man, Guernsey, Jersey, Luxembourg, even the mighty Switzerland. They've all caved in and they pass on total information if the French tax office asks for it. Same in the UK. It goes backwards and forwards to virtually all the normal countries in the world. So I would suggest be very careful if you're considering using a foreign company or some sort of crafty, I can save something here method, because all of the information, everything will be through the notaire's office, everything will be available through the banking system. And if you try to abuse the system and get away with saving VAT or something else, be careful. It probably won't last too long, and better to declare and be the good person from day one instead of trying to cheat the system. It doesn't work anymore.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Natalie, we've not heard from you for a while. We've got 10 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen. These webinars fly by. I'm really enjoying this evening, but we do have the time limit to stick to, so I'll stop talking. Natalie, obviously we've got these rates. The European Central Bank cut interest rates today, the third cut of this year. It certainly helped pound euro levels. It's weakened the euro. What are rates like in France for borrowing? What's that looking like?
Much more attractive than the UK at the moment, is what I can say. So a 20-year fixed rate can range from 3.76 up to 4.25%. There are various options, again, depending on your situation. You can go for a pure fixed rate. You can go for a capped variable rate, which is very popular at the moment, offering all sorts of flexibility. And, we're hoping, fingers crossed, although none of us have a crystal ball, that in view of what's been happening with the Euribor, that, rates will drop again, hopefully this side of Christmas. I think once the US election has been and gone and the dust has settled from it, that will certainly help and give a little bit more certainty. So we're really keen. The average cost of a 2-year tracker mortgage in the UK is 5.36 according to Forbes, compared to France with a variable rate of 3.72 over 15 years. So, it's much more attractive looking at those numbers to buy in France at the moment. You get more for your money, if you like, than in the UK.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good time to be buying. So if we're looking at transactions ahead, I've got another question that's come in about protecting against adverse currency movements. So I think that's a good one to follow on with. So we talked before about the wallet, about how you can utilize that to protect your exchange rate by purchasing at an optimum time. Just to reference that, if you were to use your bank, typically with the banks, you can only buy your currency when the payments are actually due. So we talked before about how this can take up to 3 months. If we're talking about a property in the Alps, you could be talking obviously a very large amount of money. You're getting into the chalets, well over $1 million. Certainly you're looking at a good few $100,000 for most properties there. So if you've got to wait 3 months to purchase that currency, if you're talking, say, €500,000, every cent on that is going to be the best part of sort of £4,000. So, the predictions over the next 3 months, the difference between the high and the low, it's about 6 cents. So if you're using the bank, you're forced to accept whatever the exchange rate is on the actual day. As Natalie has pointed out there, and we mentioned before, we've got the US election coming up, the UK budget. These are all potentially quite volatile times ahead. So that's why it's important to have some sort of strategy in place And Alan was talking before about how, you know, we want to understand the client, and that's certainly what we do. So we talk very simply about a more defensive strategy. So you may have just had your offer accepted, you know what your budget is for the purchase, and you really don't want to take any risk. In that scenario, you may look to purchase everything on this wallet quite early on, or you could do the forward contract, where for a 10% deposit, you can fix the rate for up to a year, and then you pay the balance off when you need to. So let's just say you had an offer accepted today, you expect to complete in January, you're selling your UK property in December, you know, you're not going to get the money till December. How can I buy my currency? Well, you would use the forward contract in that scenario to fix the rate so that you'd know today what that property sale in pounds in December is actually going to be worth in euros. So as I say, that's a more defensive strategy. And then you may opt for a more speculative strategy. In the same example, you've had your offer accepted today, you're completing in January. So we do your deposit. Of course, that has to be paid. You can't get away from that. But with the balance, you might say, well, look, Jonathan, I'm hoping the rates are going to go higher. Just keep me informed of what's happening. And then there's just lots of different ways you can do that. You might purchase 20% next month, 50% at Christmas. You know, there's no sort of right or wrong answer with that other strategy, but ultimately what you're hoping for is that the rates get better. Now, they don't always get better, and you may suddenly decide actually you want to go a bit more defensive. You don't want to take the risk. You don't want to be waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, looking at exchange rates, worrying about what Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer are going to do, and you just want to buy your currency. So again, there's no sort of right or wrong answer. It's about us keeping up to date with what's going on in the market, having these options, and just really trying to find a solution that works for you. So yes, the question there was about adverse currency movements. What can we do? That's how we can help you. So coming back to questions, Alan, we just had a question coming in about declarations. I think we may have touched on this. Declaration timing. Obviously, if people are moving funds, you know, from the UK to France, are there declarations that are due at certain times? How does that work, please?
It's the French tax form. The French tax year starts on the 1st of January, ends on the 31st of December. If you arrive now, for example, today, the 17th of October, you take up residence in France, you're officially living here from now, it would be a good idea to fill in the first tax form, which will be next year. For our part of the world here, it's going to be around next April or May of 2025. It would be a good idea to declare everything on that tax form then correctly. So if you arrive now, I've got a client in this particular position actually at the moment, a lady with ISAs and an investment portfolio in the UK. She's actually arrived around now. So I'm advising, put these investments into something tax efficient in France within the next few weeks. There's no immediate rush on the day you arrive, but definitely before the end of the year, before the end of this tax year. Then when you make your tax declaration next year for 2024, it's perfect. Everything is tidy, you're in a good zone, there's nothing lagging or bits and pieces that don't tie up. It just starts perfectly. So I would suggest the timing would be related to the tax year. So if you're arriving now, if you arrived in January, if you arrived in June, think your first tax form is going to be next year. Tidy things up this year, move those investments into something that would be very agreeable in the French system and very advantageous for you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Well, look, I'm really sorry, but we've only got a couple of minutes left, and we're going to do just a quick outro from each of the panelists, just to leave us with some soupçons of you know, their tidbits of information, just something to lead us on. But no, thank you very much, audience. We will be emailing you a copy of this webinar, and like we said, it's impossible to fit everything, all of the years of knowledge of all of our panelists into 1 hour. But yes, I've certainly learned some good things tonight. It's always great to hear Gareth talking about, you know, his adventures in the mountains and how he got into the work, and he knows the places so well. So I'd really encourage any of the audience to reach out to him and find out more of his knowledge, as well as, of course, Natalie's and Alan's. But yes, Alan, if I could hand over to you for your outro, please.
Yeah, enjoyed this evening very much. I hope everyone listening has gained from this. Yeah, simply ask us, you know, get into an in-depth chat backwards and forwards. Do not ever hesitate about questions, because sometimes people think the questions are a little bit silly or irrelevant. They're not to us, because we've been through it. So please put them on an email, put them on an SMS, put them through any method you want. We're pretty tech happy, but make sure you're clear and you've got the whole picture, and then you will have a very happy move. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's brilliant. And over to you, Natalie. Thank you.
I echo what Alan has said. I think, you know, if you're serious about moving abroad, the best thing to do is make informed decisions. So why not get in touch with the experts, such as, well, all three of us that are here, four of us, sorry, here, just to make that move or purchase an informed one, know exactly what you can afford, exactly what's achievable, how it works, and just be guided through the process. Talk to the experts, don't listen to the noise.
Very good. Thank you, Natalie. And Gareth, over to you, please.
I can see the list of questions here, and we haven't even got halfway through them. Can't we go on for another hour and we'll just keep talking? But we do have other things to do. So just email me the questions for property, and I'm happy to get back to you. Yes, if you haven't had your question answered, send us a message.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gareth. Well, from me, a very big thank you to our panelists for giving up their evening and sharing tidbits of their knowledge. And yeah, as like Gareth said, do get in touch with us. We'd be very happy to have just an open conversation with you all, explain, answer any questions. From my point of view, certainly for you UK buyers, pound euro rates very close to 2.5 year highs, 2.5 years. It's brilliant. Dollar to euro is very, very strong as well. That's some of the best points today since the beginning of August, so over a 2-month high, selling dollars to buy euros. As Natalie has said, the mortgage rates are brilliant as well. So yes, from a finance perspective, there's a number of positive reasons there. So yeah, thank you very much, audience, for joining us. We'll get a copy of this out to you. You'll have all of the panelists' details, and we'd love to hear from you. Good luck with your search, and thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.